Nobody in the events department at the Carrova Grand had worked longer than Petra Delacroix, and nobody watched more carefully. 14 years behind a console of floor plans and seating charts had given her a particular skill. She could read a room before the first guest arrived. The shape of the arrangement, the distance between the principals, who was brought in and who was kept out, all of it spoke if you knew how to listen. So when the regional negotiations came in on a Thursday booking, and the Reyes party requested a certified Latvian and German interpreter attached to the principal for 7 formal dinners, Petra understood what they were asking without the words being said plainly. Protocol in the Hanover block of the old trading routes still required it. The principal arrived accompanied, or the other side did not open. It was not sentiment. It was the shape of a room. The woman they arranged was named Nadia Rourke. Petra met her at the side entrance on the Sunday before it began. She was 31, medium height, wearing a gray wool coat and carrying a document case. She had worked the Tallinn summit and 3 Baltic trade forums. She spoke 6 languages with certification in 4 and functional fluency in 2 more. She was professional and unimpressed, which Petra appreciated, and she asked only one question, whether she would have access to the pre-dinner briefing materials. Petra said yes and meant it. Nadia thanked her and went upstairs to read the room notes. Mateo Reyes arrived at 6 that evening with 2 men Petra recognized from the spring booking and a third she didn't. He was in his early 40s, broad-shouldered, dark suit immaculate, the kind of stillness that made a room quiet when he entered it. She had seen powerful men before. She had never seen quite that quality of stillness. Not tension, not aggression, just an absolute composure that communicated, without a single word, that he had already seen every part of whatever room he was entering and had decided what he thought of it. His people deferred without looking at him. The front desk manager lost half a sentence when he walked past. Petra herself had to consciously not lower her voice when she confirmed his suite. She introduced them in the corridor outside the amber room before the first dinner. It was efficient and correct. She said Nadia Rourke's name and credentials, confirmed the arrangement, and withdrew to her post. What she saw in those 12 seconds was unremarkable. Nadia said she had reviewed the briefing materials and had one clarifying question about the Hanover bloc representative's title convention. He looked at her for 2 seconds, said ask it, and listened to her answer it himself before she finished the sentence, which made her stop mid-word. He said correct, she said good, and they walked in. It was Helene Briard, the head waitress who managed the amber room personally on high-booking evenings, who told Petra about Monday. She described it the way she described most things, plainly and without embellishment. The bloc representative, a man named Veldren, had made a comment in German between courses that was meant for the man on his left and not meant for the table. Standard lateral conversation, the kind translators don't pick up because it isn't addressed to anyone. Nadia had caught it. She had leaned very slightly toward Mateo Reyes's left side, not touching, barely perceptible, and said, in under 10 words, what had been said and what it likely meant for the morning session. He had not reacted. He had acknowledged it with a single nod so small Helene almost missed it. And when the morning session reconvened, Petra was told he had opened with a phrase that made Veldren visibly recalculate. The deal that had been a near thing on the balance sheet that morning was confirmed by 3 o'clock. Petra didn't witness that part. What she witnessed was the hallway afterward. She had been coming down from the mezzanine with a revised seating plan when she saw them at the far end of the corridor outside the amber room. The session had just closed. His 2 men were 10 paces behind, giving the gap instinctively. Nadia was walking beside him with her document case, talking, not performing attention, talking the way people talk when they think only about what they are saying. He had slowed his pace. He was a man who walked at his own speed and expected the room to adjust. He had adjusted. She was saying something, and she gestured once. A small, precise gesture that meant she was making a technical point, and he said something back that made her stop walking. She looked at him. Then she laughed, briefly and genuinely, the way people laugh when they are genuinely surprised by something. He didn't smile, precisely. But the quality of his stillness changed. Something in it loosened. Petra noted it and said nothing. The week continued. By Wednesday, she noticed that the arrangement had extended itself organically in a way that hadn't been specified in the booking. He had invited her to sit in on the afternoon bilateral, which was not a dinner and not a formal event, and therefore outside the terms of the arrangement. She had come with her notes. By Thursday, she was attending the morning pre-session without being asked. By Thursday evening, Petra observed, not because she was watching, but because the amber room was her room and she was always there, that when the last course was cleared and the other principals rose, he did not rise immediately. He and Nadia Rourke remained at the table for 20 minutes after the room had emptied, and they were not talking about German title conventions. She was asking him something, and he was answering it with the kind of care people use when the question matters. Not performing answers, giving them, she told Petra later. Weeks later, after the booking had closed and she had called to retrieve a document case she'd left in the mezzanine storage, that she hadn't been prepared for someone who listened the way he listened. She said it plainly with no particular drama. She said, "I've translated for heads of state and trade ministers and twice for a former prime minister, and none of them listened the way this man listened. He heard what you actually said, not what he was waiting to say next." She paused. She said, "That's rarer than it sounds." The last formal dinner was Saturday. Petra set the room herself, which she never did for a 7-night booking. She found that she wanted to. She adjusted the floral arrangement at the primary table, rechecked the lighting temperature, confirmed the wine service with Helene. The bloc representatives and their staff had the customary departure gifts waiting. The arrangement was complete. 7 dinners. The terms had been met. He came in at 6:45, which was 15 minutes earlier than required, and he came alone. His 2 people waited in the corridor. Petra was at her post near the main entrance and watched him cross the room to where Nadia Rourke was standing at the window, reviewing her notes for the final dinner. She had her back to him. He stopped a few feet away and said her name. She turned. He said, "I wanted a moment before it became a room." She closed her notes. He said, "The arrangement ends tonight." He said it the way people say things they have decided they will say and say them. Exactly right. Then he said, "I'd like your answer on whether you're open to something that isn't an arrangement." She was quiet for a beat. She said, "I'd need to think about it." He said, "Of course." He said, "Take the time you need." He said, "I'll be in the city through January." She looked at him for a moment. She said, "I thought you didn't ask for things you weren't certain of." He said, "I don't. This is the first exception." Petra turned back to her console. She had watched rooms for 14 years. She had watched hands across tables and silences that cost everything, and one agreement made with nothing more than a look. She had learned that the things that were real were almost always quiet. They didn't announce themselves. They settled into the room like the last adjustment of the lights before the dinner began. And you had to know what to look for to see them. In January, she received a booking confirmation for a private dinner party of 2, under the name Reyes. She set the room herself again. It seemed right.